So you're very welcome here, guys, to Walsh Whiskey Distillery. Woody is my name. I'm going to bring you around. We're going to have a look at what goes on. We're the largest manual distillery that exists in Ireland today. So here, while yes, we use computers to help us in certain ways, absolutely no computer makes a decision here. Every decision is made by the human hand, the human eye and the human nose. And as we go around, you're going to see that. The tour is slightly different than other tours. Some distilleries in Ireland, it's museum based, so you don't get near the distillery. And then of course some are automatic, so you don't get as interactive as you can here. So this one is going to be a hands-on experience. It's all about the senses, the sights, the smells, the sounds, the feel of the place, and of course the taste at the end, which people always look forward to. So we're going to get that, and you're going to be walking along the same path as the spirit itself. So it's a nice experience, and whatever's happening is happening. If we're in the middle of a cook, in the middle of a mash, you get to see that. Fermentation, you get to see that. You know, so it's just a live experience. So we're going to start upstairs, okay, and we'll begin our tour up there. So follow me this way. As you see driving in, it's got that rural setting, and you come along, you can see sort of the cows in the field, and we have the horses in the paddock, and there were some ducks in the pond, but there's none now, so there's probably a fox in the fence. So it's sort of one of those experiences. You get a lot of wildlife and stuff because we're trying to bring people back to a certain point. Now, to explain that, we'll start by looking where we are. Royal Oak. Royal Oak is a very special place for us. The history of Royal Oak, the story that the locals tell, is Charles II. So Charles II was a huge advocate for Ireland to be free. So he was taken from the throne because obviously that's not what they wanted to hear. So he escaped England, came over to Ireland and spent a lot of time with some friends over here. A lot of it was spent around the southeast, around this area. So while he was here, he was chased upon by British soldiers and he hid from them to evade capture because it meant death. So when that passed and he came down from his hiding place, he saw it was an oak tree. So being royalty himself, he declared it a royal oak. So the whole area became known as Royal Oak after that. So that's the story that goes with the land, not just where we are, but all of this land all around is known as Royal Oak. So history is a big thing for us, and history is big in whiskey as well. There's a house on site, and that old house up there is from 1755. And it's instrumental in what we're trying to do, because 1755, if you look in the history of whiskey, is when Irish whiskey was at its height. If you went anywhere and said, hey, I'll have a good whiskey, Irish is what you were given, because it was the one that people would look for quality. So our aim is to restore that house fully back to its natural glory. It was completely destroyed. I'll show you a book here, and you'll see what it was like a good bit before we took it over. It actually had deteriorated even more. But this book is The Abandoned Mansions of Ireland by Tarquin Blake, and you can see that one of the houses. Holleden House is known now, originally Malcolmville. The landlords at the time, the Vigors, they went along and they took over the place and renamed it Holleden because they were from a place called Holleden in Devon. So that became known as Holleden. Locally it's known as O'Grady's because the last living member was Faith O'Grady. Her mum had married an O'Grady locally. So that's how they integrated very well in society. The landlords had a tough enough time over here, and rightly so, because they came and took the land, and if your house was on the land, you now paid rent on your own house and your own land, which was very unfair. So when we became free, the history books will tell you, three main things happened. One is that the landlords ran back to England like the cowardly dogs they were. Secondly, if they didn't, our houses burnt down by the Irish because we didn't like them. Preferably dead still in the house. So the third thing was, if there were good landlords at the time, they remained and they stayed here and they became a part of society around. So the Vigors that lived here, they were a very good family. So they remained, and this estate was partly left to them. But when Faith O'Grady, the last living member, died, she never married or had kids. So when she died, the line of Vigors died with her, and the house fell into its disrepair, as you can see from the book. Our mission is to restore it fully to its natural glory because of that 1755 feel. That house will, in the future, become the welcome for the visitors as they arrive to our distillery. You're going to step right back, and as you step back, you're going to step right back into 1755, the time of the Hailacon era for Irish whiskey. So to give people that feeling. So that's the house and a good historical perspective, and it gives us a perfect time to talk about Irish whiskey. But you also have a lot of other elements. As you can see, the beauty of the land that's here, the fantastic trees that we have, and we've had them numbered and dated, and they are, a majority of them are oak. There's a whole forestry area behind the house as well, and they reckoned that they're about between 200 and 250 years. So there's a long established connection with oak, which of course is important to the whiskey business because we predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly mature our spirit in oak barrels. So it's nice to have that connection with the land. Then you have the water source. So the water source for a whiskey comes from underneath the ground, about 70 metres under where we are now, under this ground. We come across what you call the natural barrel aquifer. So it is the largest underground lake in Leinster. It's about 2.5 times what the geologists tell us, but 2.5 times the capacity that we need, so we'll never run dry, and we'll always have that one source of water to make our whiskey from. And of course it's perfect water for making whiskey, but then I am going to tell you that anyway, but it is, it's perfect for us, and it's a great source of water. That's not the only water we have around here. The River Barrow, one of the main rivers of Ireland, flows right beside our land, and that river has its own instrumental in whiskey as well, because Carlow is known as the barley basket of Ireland. So they say the best barley you get comes from this Carlow area. It's a mix of sand and soil we seem to have that, if you ask any agronomist, they'll tell you that it's what's needed for not just barley, but in particular malting barley. So that is why we're delighted to be set right in the heart of the barley basket of Ireland in order to be able to get local barley for our whiskey. And of course, back in the past, I was known that this was good barley as well, so it was the barley that the big distilleries of the past wanted. And this whole area around here is tons and tons of mills disused because of the decline in Irish whiskey over time. But they were all here because of the fact that this was the barley was needed, and that river was the old roadway of Ireland. You didn't travel on the roads, took too long. So you would use the barges. So many a barge full of barley would go up, and we'd be delighted when we'd see the barrels of whiskey coming back down, of course. So we honour that by allowing that water to become part of the process. So the ponds that you crossed when you were coming in across the bridge, that's live river water. We take it in straight from the barrel. If you can even see at the moment, it's pumping right now over in that pond over there. So we're taking it in. You can see algae growth, it's live water. It ends up in there, and we've got a pump system then, and we use that water to go through our system for the cooling. So it's our cooling water. It's an ecological way of doing our cooling water. It comes in, we put it through the process. It never touches the spirit, it's in a closed system, but it is a way that we use it in the condensers, which I'll talk about later on. So that is the water sources, but the biggest thing we have, of course, is the land itself. So let's take it back a little step. We're going back to 700 AD. So the invention of whiskey, one of the stories is, of course, that it all began with Irish monks. Irish monks were travelling around. Now, monks were the scholars and the scribes of the world. That's what they did. They went out, they found information, they brought it back, they studied it, and then they shared it with everybody. So when they came across the Greeks were actually making perfumes. Now, they were using these small little albinics for perfumes. They brought them back here to Ireland, and they studied them. And we found something intrinsic about the Irish, and that is that we're Irish. We don't need to smell good, we need to drink. So never mind your perfume. Now that's not really true, not fair on the poor old monks. What the monks were actually doing, the monks were going along and they were making medicines. Now one such medicine was called aquavitae. Now the aquavitae was used for quite a lot of different things. One thing is you take a piece of cloth and you soak it in the aquavitae and you put it on an open wound like a poultice. Another one is you would rub it into muscular aches, and of course then you would ingest it for things, different ailments. In particular, it was used for headaches and tummy aches. As it turns out, it caused headaches and tummy aches because what they actually had, this aquavitae, was your spirit that became the whiskey upon maturation. So that's how whiskey all started off here in Ireland. Now where did it start off? Let's contextualise it. If you look at any industry at all, I know everyone here is German, so I don't know Germany too well, but I'm sure that your places, your cities were built up around industries, because that's usually what happened. So if you wanted to make something, you would go to a certain place. Why? Because everything you needed was there to make it. And back in the past, even more so, when we didn't have the modes of transport. So if we go back to 700 AD, and you're looking at this aquavitae, the two things we needed in particular was barley and water. Now you didn't travel, so it had to be there. So where did it all start? Where would you find the sources? On a farm. So all of these monks would have worked little farmyard distilleries, and that's where the birth of whiskey took place. Now there's always a contention, did the Scots invent it, did the Irish invent it? And the Scots, of course, say they did, because they're like that, you know. The Scots say they did. Now the reasoning behind it is because the oldest reference that they had to whiskey was from 1498, which was Scottish. So they would say, well look, it's the oldest reference, we invented it. But lo and behold, in Kilkenny, which is a neighbouring city here, in Kilkenny, in the ruins of a church, the Red Book of Ossory was discovered. And this Red Book of Ossory, when it was examined, not only contained references to the whiskey of the time, that aquavitae, but also recipes. And the book has been dated to 1324. So now, we predate the Scots by over 100 years, so with a smile on their face, they happily accept that the Irish invented whiskey. But we both know it goes back. And if the truth be told, I imagine it was a parallel line, because the Scots were our brothers, they were Celtic brothers. So when these monks came back, the very first place they would have went to talk about what they found and what they were doing would have been Scotland. So I imagine it was a parallel line in the development of whiskey, myself. But of course, I wouldn't tell the Scots that. It's still the same as us. But if we take it back, you're talking about back to the farm. That's where it all started. So that's what we're trying to do here. That's why we have cows in the field, and the horse in the paddock, and the drugs. We're trying to bring people back to that start, where it all began, where distillation all started back here on the farm. So Bernard and Rosemary Walsh are the owners of Walsh Whisky Distillery. Now, both Irish. Rosemary's lived her whole life here in Carlow. Bernard, of course, is a Tipperary man, and then, as we say in Ireland, for his sins, getting married, he moved up to Carlow. And their passion is land. Their background, both backgrounds of their families have been doing farming. And of course, whiskey is a farming product. It's a field to bottle or grain to glass. So this was what they knew was the right thing to do. So back in 1999 was when they laid down the very first whiskey that was their own. And from then till now, we've only produced the highest quality whiskies that you'll find on the market for Irish whiskey. And that is our intention going forward. That mantra of quality, quality, quality. So this distillery then was always a dream for them to have, so this is their dream turned into reality. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at the vision that they had. We have a video here, and we'll take a little bit of time just to watch that, and you'll hear Bernard talk and see the family, and you'll see exactly, while yes, 100% this is about profit, it's a business, but it's more than that. You can even see that driving up. It's more than that. It's also about the beauty of what we have around here. It gives so much to help us make the whiskey, you have to give back to it. And of course, it's also about the history and the heritage that Irish whiskey has. So let's take a moment. It is about whiskey, of course it is, that has to be the focus. But there's also a lot more that this place has to offer. And we see that ourselves in the beautiful history and surroundings that we have. It would have been very easy to build a big industrial building and up the road have a visitor centre, but instead of that, we're proud of what we're doing here. We're a manual site because we want to hold on to that beautiful heritage of what went before, where humans made decisions. And it's very easy for a distillery to say, oh, well, we've been distilling in our family since 1622, 1824, 1361, whatever number you want. Because the truth is, if you have Irish connections in your family and you trace back far enough, you will find a distiller in your family. They reckon around over 85 to 90% of Ireland were distilling legally. Illegally, 100%. So there was definitely a distiller. So instead of that, like I said, Bernard just talks about our start, which was 1999, and moving from there on and looking to the future, keeping a good hold on that wonderful past. But the past is not the family that we had in the past that distilled, it's those monks. It's what they did from the very start. It's the handing on, generation to generation, of the craft that is distillation. So that's what we tried to get across here, and that's why we're so interactive, and that's why you're going to get so close to things, because we want you to be able to walk out and know exactly what's going on and know about Irish whiskey. So we're going to do that. A few things just to be aware of before we go down. First of all, of course, we have the usual regulations and rules. So it's a live environment. So we have to be very careful when we go inside with hot vats and stuff like that, because it is like a distillery. We're very lucky to be able to get up close and personal with the sort of stuff, but you just got to have safety conscious around it. I'll touch test anything, so don't worry about that, and you can know how close you can get. It's a FEMAS environment. We're okay, nobody has it, but just to let you know, a lot of what we do goes back into the community or into the environment. So we have to be very careful not to have any cross-contamination, so no food or drink is allowed across the threshold. Fire regulation, every home in Ireland has the same fire regulation that even businesses have. And that is, if we hear the fire alarm, we make our way as safely as we can to the outside of the building and we go to our fire center. I'll be with you all the time, so if you see me running screaming, I'd follow me in suit, I'd say. The final thing is, there's one area which is known as an ATEX zone. So that is an area where you are not allowed to bring any electronic device at all. So if you have a phone, if you have a camera, if you have anything, we leave it outside the room, and then when we come back out, if it's still there, you can have it back. Okay, so is that okay with everybody? Everyone happy with that? Okay, great. So listen, why don't we make a move and get things started? It's a very hard grain, and the monks discovered if they soaked it in water, they were able to use it. Now, what was happening when that was called malting? So when they soaked it in warm water, what was going on was that enzymes are becoming active inside of every single grain of barley. Those enzymes are needed later on to convert starch, which is also in the barley, into sugar. And then we're able to extract the alcohol from the sugar with fermentation. So that's exactly what we were doing with this. Now, when that has happened, we see the germination starting, we drain off the water, and in Ireland we use a dry heat to dry the barley. So that ends up giving us a nice dry barley, which has got those lovely fruit flavours. So that's what we call our malted barley. So malted barley is nice and soft, so we're going to take a little piece to bite. Okay, so you can bite and have a taste. You get that lovely burst of malt flavour. And that's what we're looking for in this. So with that, that's what's going to help us with our flavours later on. So what we do is we take that's our malted barley. So in the past, when the monks started off, they started the whole thing off and they made what we call single malt. Single malt is made from malted barley from one distillery. So when you do that, they were making single malt, and obviously, because we're Irish, we made the best single malt in the whole world. That's it. But England knew that. So when they came over, they started putting tax on things. One of the things they taxed was our single malt. They were 100%. We knew how to make the best single malt in the world, but not only did we know how to do it, we also knew how to smuggle it as well. So that's what we did. So when they put the tax on the whiskey, we just smuggled it all around the world. Now it drove England crazy. They couldn't cash us. So under the nose of the British, we were getting whiskey everywhere. It drove them mad. They weren't getting money for it. When they came back, they took the tax away from the whiskey and slapped it on the malting of the barley. Now we were stuck because the farmer had to do the malting. He wasn't going to pay the tax, so we went to buy it from the farmer. Obviously the tax was applied. We were paying it. So of course, being Irish, we said, yeah, we're not doing that. So we went to them and said, how can we get around this tax? So what we did is we said, well, hold on, this is in there. This unmalted barley nobody's using. Why not? No enzymes. What good was it? But we reckoned that if we took the enzymes that were in this, there's probably enough that would convert the starch in here and also in here. So we gave it a shot. Suddenly, we discovered a beautiful pepper spice and a fantastic creamy mouthfeel. We just invented a whole new premium whiskey, and we call that pot still whiskey. So, single malt, a mash of both is your pot still. Is that okay? Yeah. Great. So then around 1960 we took back an invention which we didn't accept. We had invented it ourselves in 1820, but the quality was dreadful. Now the Canadians did a lot of work on improving the quality, and in 1960 we brought it back to Ireland, and that was where we started using other grains. Now it was a grain whiskey, cheaper whiskey. What we use here today, of course, is maize. Maize is jam-packed with starch, it's got tons of starch in it, and it's ideal for us for what we're looking for. But it's very hard and it takes a lot of work to get that starch out, that's the only thing. So what we've got to do is break these down into workable materials. This is our mill room in here. So we have two mills inside there. One is a roller mill. So a roller mill is literally rollers which will roll anything that goes between it and crush it. So the barley goes through the roller mill. The unmalted barley will break into a large grist, just like that, okay? While your malted barley, which is the one you tasted, breaks a lot finer. Is that okay? Yeah. As I said, this needs a lot of work. You've got to aggressively attack it, and that's exactly what it is. It's a hammer mill, so it's literally crushing it, crushing it, crushing it. So we break that down until we get a nice flour. So you can see from there, that's the flour there. Now, we still don't have the starch. We only have flour. A little bit of work to do before we get the starch out, and that is called cooking. So we have to cook maize, but we don't cook the barley. Is that okay? All right. So let's go and have a look at our cooker and see what we do there. Flour from the maize. Now what happens in here is we put 10,500 litres of water in here. With that we add 3 tonnes of maize. That maize goes inside in a flour form and also meets with the water. Now what's going to happen if I mix water and flour together? It's going to turn into a paste. We don't want that because this is a pressure cooker. And if something pastes up and blocks something, this whole thing will explode. So in order to keep the viscosity nice and liquid, we add a little bit of malted barley, that mashed malted barley in there. And that will actually keep it nice and liquid for us. So when that's all inside there, we seal the whole thing up, and that's when we add 2 things, pressure and heat. The pressure we put in here is 3.2 bar pressure. So that's like about 1.5 times the pressure of a car tire. So you imagine the intensity of pressure in a car tire. So even more inside there. We add then temperature that we get up to 140 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, it's going to rapidly cook up the mix that we have in there. The only thing is, the malted barley we put in is sacrificial, because at that temperature it's going to kill off what we're looking for, which is the enzymes. But we don't mind that because we do need it in order to keep it nice and liquid for us. So inside there, 40 minutes later, what's happened during the cook is all of the starch has been extracted, and we're ready for the next step. Our next step is to convert starch into sugar. And as I said earlier on, that's what those enzymes will do. But if this is at 140 degrees, if I put barley in for the enzymes, it's not going to work, it's going to kill it. So what we've got to do is we've got to reduce the temperature. How we do that is by reducing the pressure. So we've got valves, and it's a good point to notice where we have valves and levers. So you can see it is all manual, everything is done by hand. So here, it's literally a case of opening slowly, letting out some pressure, keeping an eye on it, checking the valves, coming back up, opening a bit more. I can't just grab this and do that. If I do that when this is under pressure, the whole thing will explode. I find this in Dusseldorf and which hardly involved so I don't want that to happen. So there's none of that, that's not allowed. What it is, it's nice and slow movements, reducing, watching the pressure drop, slow movement, and that's it. So that's what we do until we have it reduced from the temperature of 140 down to our strike temperature, which is 64.5 degrees. Now that's the optimum temperature for the enzymes. So now that we have that at that, we bring a atmospheric pressure, put in the barley with the enzymes, they start to go along, they meet with the starch, and it converts it all into sugar, which takes a further 40 minutes. So now what we have is what we call in business our wort, a strong sugar liquid. We take it out of here, we bring it into a stainless steel container, which we call a fermentation tank. What's going to happen is we're going to add yeast. But again, you've got to play with temperatures. So we can't put it in at 64.5 because the yeast will die. We've got to reduce it down to somewhere around the mid-20s. We can get up into the 30s, but around the mid-20s, a bit higher is perfect for us. Get the yeast inside. Yeast and sugar don't get on very well, so they start the battle. Now what happens, there's two things come from that, 2 byproducts. First of all, carbon dioxide. We don't need carbon dioxide, so of course we send it out to our beautiful trees, we take it in, and they of course with photosynthesis make oxygen and release it into the world. So really we're an oxygen making facility here on site. If you're breathing today, you're very welcome. That's okay. So saving lives and making whiskey on a daily basis. That's what we do here. So when we end up releasing that CO2, the other byproduct that remains behind in that tank is of course the alcohol. So after 3 days fermentation, as you heard Bernard say upstairs, you end up with 8 to 10% alcohol, essentially a beer. Okay? So we're going to stop there because that is our maize, and as I said, the barley for the single malt posset does not go into the cooker at all. This is only used for the maize. So we're going to stop there, we'll have a look inside this, it's not on at the moment, so we'll get a good look inside, and then we'll go and have a look at the fermentation of the maize so you can get a good experience of that. So that is our maize in fermentation. So you've seen cooking, You've seen what happens in the cooker. That gets transferred then. There's a myriad of pipe work underneath. We load the barrels, send it the right way, and it goes into the tank, and we work away from there. All right? Rory, you put the water in now. Yeah, do you want to get a shot at it if you want to?
Yeah, one. Yeah, thank you.
Circulating at the moment as well, so if you want to get in and get a shot of that,
yeah,
it's a nice taste as well. So what happens here is that the barley will come in from the mill room, and as it comes in, it comes down along the street. If we're making single malt, we're only bringing malted barley in from the mill room. If we're making pot still, we're bringing malted and unmalted together. That comes down along and hits into this tube. Coming up to meet it is water already preheated at 64.5 degrees. It goes inside, combines here, and straight away, immediately, the conversion of starch into sugars is taking place. It goes inside here then and forms a bed. So as I'm telling you, go ahead, have a look inside, get a look at what's going on in there at the moment. It's recirculating at the moment, trying to get all that liquid all around, and what it's doing is it's ensuring that it all turns from that starch into sugar. Okay? So you can work away there. And when that liquid is in there, the barley forms a bed. The floor of this is like a vented floor. It's like a sieve. It allows that liquid to drain through, but it holds back the barley. So what we do is we take that nice, strong, sugary wort that has been made, and when we take that out, what happens is it ends up being transferred over to a fermentation tank. But we're not finished. We spray water on now at a higher degree. That water gets in there and it pulls more of the sugars from the barley. That liquid, that drains out and goes and joins the first one. Both of those are nice, two strong sugar solutions. But we're not finished yet because we know there's more in that barley. So we spray a third water on. Now this time, that water is at very high temperature. We're doing single malt at the moment, so that temperature in around 88 degrees. So that will pull the last of the sugars out of the barley. Now, it's not going to be a strong sugar solution, it's going to be fairly weak. So we don't want to mix it with the good stuff that we have. So what we do instead is we keep it separate. The barley now is finished for us, but it's still very good. So we end up taking it out, it's called drafting out. Take it outside, it gets collected by a central farming community, and it will end up going back into the farms as cattle feed. So it's not wasted. Then we bring a fresh mash of barley in here, and as we do, that water that comes up at 64.5 degrees is the weak sugar solution from the last one. So we recover that, and it kick-starts the whole process, and we begin again. All right? So now that we know that, let's have a smell of the fermentation. The fermentation that we're going to look at is on, I think it's at the end of its first day. Okay. So it's an early enough fermentation. So let's have this one like an acidic sort of a sweetness. This one is going to be more like a beer, and you'll even notice it's starting to form a head at the moment from the CO2. So go ahead, have a look and have a smell.
What? So it's just, yeah, it's starting up, yeah.
You get the difference. Bubbles on day two. Natural fact, you'd be careful because it can foam and you'll be here one day and suddenly it starts coming out of the top. It doesn't. So, what we have here is we have our barley. Here we have our maize. So what we're going to do is keep them separate. Okay? They don't mix together at all, ever. You're looking at 2 tanks here. We actually have 16 of these all together. So 2 inside so the public can access them, and then the other 14 are on the tank farm outside. So essentially, they're 15,000 litres each. So we're going to have 16 tanks multiplied by 15,000 litres, all at between 8 and 10%. And that's a problem because we're Irish. That's not strong enough. We need a little bit stronger. So this is where distillation comes in. So a very quick way to explain distillation is I want you to think of a beer. You're Germans, tell me a German beer. Krombacher, I like the name of it because I can pronounce that. Krombacher. I feel German. So does it come in a bottle? Yes? Yeah. Okay, a bottle of Krombacher, what percent is that?
4.5 maybe?
4.5. Well, I'm telling you now, there's 100% alcohol in there. Okay? The reason it's 4.5 is because of the non-alcoholic liquid with it. Much like if you buy a short and you add a mixer, you drop the percent so it's easier to drink. So essentially, if I'm able to take that beer at 4.5% and pull the alcohol away from the non-alcoholic liquid, I'm back to that 100% alcohol. That's sort of what distillation is. We do that and then we clean it, purify it, and we look for the best. And once we get that, that's what goes into our barrels and becomes your whiskey in the future. So we are going to take a look at how that's done now when we go into our still room. This is where we will have to get rid of any electronic devices. We are, I don't know if we are still because there's so many distilleries popping up, but we were the very first distillery to ever have both the column still and the pot stills in the one room here in Ireland. So the level of alcohol is higher in concentration because of that. So that's why it's deemed an explosive area. So we're going to leave all electronic devices outside and we'll collect them on our way back. Okay. So when we go inside into the still room, we're going to look at two different types of distillation. The first one is going to be column distillation. So our columns here are 22 meters in height, and there's two columns that we're going to look at. One is called an analyzer, the other is a rectifier. I'll talk more when we get inside. Now, then of course, that's going to be used for your meals. So it's your cheaper grain whiskey that we're going to be making. That is your column still. Then you have your copper pots that Ireland are iconically known for with our triple distillation. And that is going to be with the barley to make your single malt and your pot still. Clear? Alright, let's pop inside and see how all of this works. And as well as that, you should get some, it'll give you a spice on the tongue. So you, if you could even just dip a finger and just to get a feel first. Just so
ich bin sofort besoffen. Ich fühle mich jetzt schon besoffen vom
She's drunk just from the smell, she says.
We're taking you out. We're taking you out. She's a cheat date. So when you taste a little bit, small bit on the tongue, get the feel of it, and you'll notice a spice, especially on the tip. But you'll know the beautiful journey coming down. Okay.
Ach, da kann ich mich jetzt schon dran festhalten.
Ja, du kannst meinen auch trinken.
Now.
She likes hers.
Oh, good. Good. Well, listen, I know you're in a rush, but if you want to take a seat outside, relax with your drink, and whenever you got to go, that's fine. All right. Well, listen, thank you ever so much. I enjoyed showing you around, and I hope you got a little bit from what we did you could bring with you.